Hey, I'm Nick DeMatteo, and welcome to Music is Not a Genre, the interview edition. This is the 14th edition of my interview mini-series here. We did 12 last season, season 3, and this is the second one here in season 4, and it's a big one because it's a returning guest, and it's someone that I have asked to bring people into the fold so that you can be more a part of this. And many of you sent in questions, which I'm very excited about. This will be a Q&A follow-up to the 2-part interview we had last season. And of course, if you sent in the question, you already know that my guest today is my father, Nicky DeMatteo. How you doing?
How you doing, buddy? Good to see you.
I'm all right, you know. Recovering. Many of my podcast viewers and listeners know that we had a flood. So this is the nice part of the basement at the moment. I've kind of kept it intact. Anything out there past the camera, it's anybody's guess right now. Work in progress, though. Everything's going to be okay. But that's kind of the way things have been lately. So
well, you look rather composed and considering all you've been through, you guys.
Not bad. You know, we still have a home and the home is still nice. So, and everybody's okay. So that's the good stuff. So I guess I briefed a lot of people on this. I kind of talked about it in my posts and in previous podcasts, and I talked to you about it and just kind of give a rundown of what we're going to do today, which is that last time we spoke, as hopefully many of you know, whether you're viewing this on Patreon, and if you are, thank you for being a family member there. If you are viewing it much later on YouTube, if I decide to do that, then it's wonderful that you have subscribed to youtube.com/Nick DeMatteo, or again, patreon.com/music is not a genre. Or you may be listening to this on one of the podcast services, and that is done through anchor.fm/music is not a genre, another way that you can support this podcast and everyone involved. Anchor allows you to donate any amount to put towards the production of all of this. And if you know Patreon, you kind of know what the story that is. It's a monthly membership, and it's something I do with other artists, and I really enjoy getting that email every week or every month or whatever it might be when they release something new. But that said, let me get back to wherever I was, which is that we did a 2-part interview last season, and it was 2 parts because we had so much to talk about. And I realized upon wrapping that interview that it could have been even longer. But whatever, a lot of things to prepare, and a lot of things come up while you're talking. So you out there, just so you know, today will be a massive Q&A. Many of these questions are mine. Some of them are from other people out there in the world, and I will name them one by one. Most of them are real. And others might pop up in the course of our discussion. We're going to try to keep this to an hour, but I make no promises. So is there anything you want to say as an intro, or do you want to just jump right in?
No, I'm ready to jump in.
Okay.
Your intro was really quite good, and as it always is.
Oh, well, thank you. I did not fully organize these questions. I did some organization. It's not necessarily in any particular order. I try to create some flow. But I'm going to start off with one that has been sent in by another interview subject from last season. His name is Jim Castelli, and he actually had a few questions which I've kind of peppered through here as they seem appropriate. And this seems like the right one to start with. I'm going to be reading it here. So this is from Jim to you. Since you started singing so young, how did you deal with your voice changing? If not just the material you sang in the key, but from a professional point of view?
Yeah, my voice teacher was Marie Whartonby. I started with her probably when I was about 7. And by the time we got to the voice change, she coached me through it. She made sure that I didn't do anything that might hurt the voice through the change. One of the things she and my manager friend Tony said was, don't sing rock and roll. Oh, wow. In some ways, that was good advice in terms of the technicality of the maybe screaming rock and roll with a voice changing. In other ways, it wasn't. Over the years of performing, I had to learn how not to sing correctly. You don't sing rock and roll with the trained voice, with the diction and the breathing. It's a folk music, rock and roll. It's from the people. People don't take voice lessons to, and Mrs. Whartonby, God bless her, emphasized two things: diction and projection.
Mhm.
So people have to understand what you're saying, and they have to hear what you're singing. So that was her emphasis, and it worked to that degree. And it took me a while again to unlearn things, not unlearn, but not use the big voice all the time. And that I guess
Yeah.
I hope that's the good answer, Jim.
That's it. Yeah. Did you feel like those kind of, I mean, I think I know those techniques can apply to anything if you want to use them, but do you feel like when I hear diction, of course, that's that kind of proper pronunciation and
Yeah.
bringing it out so that people can understand what you're singing. Projection, yes, but what's interesting to me there is projection is more important, let's say, if you're doing stage singing,
Mhm.
than if you are caressing a microphone, when you may need to project at some point, but you also have that more intimate voice too.
Yeah, well, I've also heard people on a microphone whose diction isn't quite what it should be. The enunciation isn't quite what it should be, I think, to keep that understanding, to keep that message flowing. One of the things when I I cantor in church, for example, and I sing the psalm. My Dr. Kiefer, who's the music director from the church, said he loves the way I sing the psalms. He said I can understand every word, and my answer to that was, well, the message is the message, and you can't, you shouldn't hide the message with trying to sound so wonderful with your voice, and it should be the importance of the words themselves. So they need to be understood. That's one of the ways I can explain that business. With singing, I went through that whole period of it. The sound of my voice is so important.
Mm.
And oh, today the Lord gave me a voice, and I need to. I was I was working a place in Wildwood called the Ramada Inn back in '77, the summer of '77.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just learned Kenny Rogers' song Lucille, and I started performing it. And during a break, I didn't take that many breaks, but the bartender said, "Nicky, you're singing this with your voice. I mean, it's a country tune, and darn if he wasn't right. So I started acting the song, and I became the character in the song. You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille, with 4 hungry kids and a crop in the field, whatever. I've forgotten most of it by now. But that's it. The message is the message. And you're a writer, so you understand. You want your words to be understood.
Well, there's that, yes. And I think that the other thing that you're saying, or that I'm, believe is important, is the emotion of what you're singing. And it's often, I have found it to be true that, let's say it's less experienced singers, or singers who are maybe still trying to find that way of expressing passion, more freely or something, tend to spend a lot of time and effort emphasizing the technique at often at the expense of the emotion. And it's one of the reasons why I find most modern versions of opera very difficult to listen to. There are very few even top-notch singers who can capture what the emotional intent was that writer put forth. And we forget, total side note, that opera was just popular music when it came out. It was like musicals of the day, and it was not written to be this keep it away from the people and it's proper and all of that stuff. It was written to just tear your heart out. And those are the, yes, there may be a time here or there where you might sacrifice a little pinch of technique somewhere, but if it's in the service of the emotion and the intent of the song, which I think is part of the message, then you're doing the right thing.
That's exactly right. Sacrifice the technique to get the message across, to get the feel across. The emotion, that's really kind of hard to pinpoint. I let the spirit take over when I sing, when I perform. The spirit of the song itself and what's coming through the message of the song. And I keep turning to the word acting, So the old Stanislavski, he said that you could sum up Stanislavski's method in 2 words. What if? What if?
Yeah.
Okay, what if I were in this particular circumstance that the song is depicting?
Right.
But I don't do that with any technical, kind of goal. I just do it. I just sing the song. Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars.
Yeah. See,
you know that song, right?
I do know. Yeah, absolutely. I've sung that before.
And you know what the original title of the song is?
In other words?
In other words.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of meeting the writer of that song, Bart Howard. I met him in New York in 1958, and I was introduced by Jimmy Lyons, one of the great piano players of the era, who played at the Blue Angel in New York. And it was Bart Howard who told me that he was talked into changing the title to the one line that is said only once in the song, "Fly Me to the Moon." And that's what people know that song by. I don't know how we got into that. We got sidetracked from the message.
I'm having a problem with the tangents just piling up in my head. So I totally understand. I will say though, when you told me that, yeah, when you told me that story before, I found that it wasn't that unusual because, first of all, that song, that's such a great line. It's also the first line of the song, and there's a tradition in poetry that often when a poem is not named, the name it's given is the first line of the song. Yeah. Wow. So it kind of works out, maybe they thought of that, or maybe they just like, that's catchier, it brings you in more,
It makes sense.
But I can.
Shakespeare's "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?"
Exactly. That's a perfect example.
The first line.
Yes. Yes. So I think that, there were several other things that popped into my head when you were talking about the voice technique, but just to kind of put a little button on it, so we make sure we answered Jim's question. It sounds like that working with someone that adept at teaching the proper technique for using a voice made it easier to transition from the boy soprano into the male baritone, and that there wasn't much of a difficulty. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but do you think that also even though you had to choose not to do certain techniques to become more of a rock and pop singer, do you feel like having that technique as a base made it easier for you to sing all of those other songs too?
Well, now in retrospect, of course, that foundation gave me the ability to sing the other songs and to sing them with, and I use the one word, credibility, and I could sing rock and roll with credibility. And if I have to, I become Tevye. If I were a rich man, what do you do?
Yeah.
So that foundation, no question about it, really helped.
That makes sense. I heard stories, and the one that keeps popping into my head is of Roger Daltrey. I don't think he really studied anything, but he's got an amazing voice, and he helped catapult the Who to all the fame that they've had. But at a certain point, and I believe it was in the 80s, he had a lot of trouble vocally.
Vocal trouble.
Yeah, and there was a point at which, and it might have been the 80s, it might have been the 90s, where critics were like, I think he's lost it. But he subsequently regained it, and I believe it's because he worked with somebody to use more proper technique. And I've found this in my past, and I feel much better about it now, that when you aren't singing that often, you can do whatever you want with your voice, and you'll probably make it to the end. But if you're doing a tour or several hours a night, several nights a week, if your technique isn't, if you're not producing the sound in a way that is, good for your body, you won't last. You won't last.
Yep. You're going to hurt your voice too.
Yeah. Yeah.
The diaphragm is that secret, that
right.
The breathing.
Right.
So Mrs. Wardenby, breathing and diction.
Yeah.
Breathing and diction. And
yeah, there you
go. Many years ago, 1980, I worked at a place in North Philadelphia called the Bent Elbow.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 5-night-a-week gig, and every night was like New Year's Eve. That's the intensity. After the gig, it was about a 6-month gig, my voice was not doing too well. For 1 full year, I had to stay away from Impossible Dream, even Mac the Knife. So, and until it got better, but
yeah,
every night was like New Year's Eve, as I said, and the intensity was so incredible.
Yeah. So that's what you had to rely on that.
Yeah, but I hope, Jim, that we've answered your question enough.
I think what Jim
through the rock and roll.
I think what Jim is thinking right now is there was another part to that question, and I have several more questions. And are you ever going to get to them? And the answer is yes, we will, but not right now, because I'm working on a plan. So. As much as I would love to keep talking about this, let's segue to something. This is something that came up in my mind when we were talking, because I have kind of a patchwork picture of a lot of your history, musically and otherwise. And, I can't ask all of the questions I would love to ask. Some of them I haven't even, thought of yet. But one that did pop up just randomly was, you've told me so often that you started performing as a child, and you performed, I guess live, and then you recorded some things, but you were performed on the TV shows and all of that, and then you did tours and stand up and everything. What I guess I never quite knew was how often did you perform, like in a given week or month or year?
So when I was a kid, I did a lot of church things that people would always call me to sing for funerals and weddings.
Oh yeah.
When I was in 1952, I was on a radio show in New York with Paul Whiteman, Now, I don't know if you're familiar with that name. He was
Yeah.
one of the great band leaders starting back in the 20s.
Right.
One of the first singers to work with Paul Whiteman was Bing Crosby, you know.
Mm.
And Paul Whiteman was the man who suggested to George Gershwin that he should write something special for a special concert, a blues concert.
Oh.
And Gershwin wrote Rhapsody in Blue in like 3 weeks back in 1924. Whiteman was huge. He also was a rather huge man as well.
Ah.
But anyway, yeah, I was on his show. And in 1951, I started on a local television show called the Horn and Hardart Children's Hour.
Mhm.
And in 5 years on that show, and I was kind of like a local celebrity, you know.
Wow.
USO shows?
Oh yeah, I did USO work back starting around 1948.
That was
So,
pre-Korean War, right?
yes, it was.
So this was all in the States, the USO work?
It was. It was at mostly at Fort Dix, New Jersey, which
Oh,
is
sure.
now McGuire Dix Lakehurst. It's a you know,
Oh, okay.
yeah. But we belong to a place called the St. Martha's House at 7th and Snyder in South Philly. It was like a community house where gathering there was with a lot of entertainers. And once in a while, Fort Dix would send an army truck to St. Martha's House to pick us up,
Mhm.
take us to do a show. Yeah,
Wow.
I remember being surprised by the fact you walk into the bathroom, there's no stalls,
Yeah.
no stalls. It's just toilets sitting there. I mean, that was crazy, you know. But anyway, that's it. That's army life. But yeah, USO shows, church, the performances really started coming together, and a lot of back, I guess, in 1970 when I started playing piano on a full-time basis.
Well, that's a question I want to get to in a
We'll
second.
get to that, yeah,
Before we
right.
get there, you then kind of transitioned to maybe like you did like record hops or record promo things, and then
Well,
you did,
that wasn't until 57.
yeah, and then you did tours too, right? And how long were those tours?
Well, the one major tour was 1960 from Chicago. It was a bus tour where you fly to Chicago and you do 31 nighters on a bus.
Wow.
And I found out later that that was the exact same tour, same itinerary that a year before Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, Richie Valens, Deanna the Belmonts, and so forth.
Right.
That was the exact same tour they took.
Yeah. I remember you mentioned that.
We had to go from Clear Lake, Iowa to Fargo, North Dakota. It was about 400 miles. And Buddy Holly could afford to rent a plane.
Yes. I know. Yeah, we mentioned that before. The 31 nighters, how many days was that?
It was I guess it was close to 32 or 3 because
Wow.
we traveled and
Oh,
we did a show, then we get on the bus and go to the next place and do another show. And Johnny and the Hurricanes was the band that was
oh yeah.
the star and the backup band. They backed
Oh,
up.
nice.
There was a
Oh,
whole bunch
wow.
of singers. Rod Lauren was on that tour. Carl Dobkins Jr., Harold Dorman, standing on the mountain looking down on the city. Harold Dorman, really nice guy. But yeah, that was basically the only tour that I did from that point of view. I did eventually go to South America for 7 weeks back in '65.
That was the other one. Okay,
Yeah,
65. Got it.
yeah.
Okay.
I spent 3 weeks in Lima, Peru, and 4 weeks in Buenos Aires,
Yeah.
and that was an interesting tour as well. But the steady singing, you know, week to week paycheck singing didn't start until around 70.
And
Somewhere,
so
yeah.
when you get to that, this I'm kind of I'm throwing in a question of mine with a question of Jim's, because I think they're kind of related.
Good.
And my question, I'm going to say them both. My question is, what was it like to transition from stand up to sit down? Was it tough? Were there issues beyond the having to, we've talked about you having to support yourself as a piano player and all of that. Were there other issues? And Jim's question, I think, related to that is when you, and this is how he puts it, when you grew out of the quote teen idol age, when fans can lose interest with an artist who's maturing, how did you handle that?
LaSalle College. I matriculated. Wait, you like this word? Matriculated.
Yeah, it's a dirty word.
Well, if I've said that word in South Philly, they beat the hell out of me. You know? in September of '61, at the suggestion of a man who was director on the Children's Hour, Merrill Brockway.
Okay.
He said, "Why don't you go to college?" My record career had gone into kind of a slump in '61. No, in '60, because I went to the director at LaSalle, Brother Robert. I said, "I got to get in." He said, "What do you mean? You have to go through it." He slowed me down a bit, and I finally got in September of '61 was my freshman year at LaSalle, and it grounded me a lot, and I loved the Christian Brothers, and I loved LaSalle. I spent 5 years there because I wanted to keep my grade point average higher. And I was still working. I was working stand up in clubs, especially Skiolas in North Philly.
Oh, okay.
A record that I had made was getting local airplay. I Have But One Heart, and it brought attention to me. And Eddie Suez, the agent, booked me into Skiolas. And as I said, I wanted to keep my grade point average higher, and so I took 5 years instead of 4 years.
Right. Someone's coaching you, I see.
Yeah, there's a little beautiful blonde Hungarian to my left.
Ah.
He asked when fans lose interest, how'd you keep on your fan base?
You asked that? Fans lose interest?
Well, that's what Jim asked. So I know there was a transition for you where you had said, like there was a slump, and then at a certain point you made the decision to transition to supporting yourself. and I guess what Jim wants to know is, was there, and I'm going to rephrase it, was there a point, how did it feel, or did you feel this, that there were fans you had that had lost interest in you, or did they transition with you to the sit down realm locally?
Yeah, well, to tell you the truth, I don't remember fans from my stand-up era. The fans that I do remember, God bless them, happened after I sat down. The first time I sat down to play was 1961, the summer of '61. Before I went to LaSalle, I wanted to make some money.
Oh, wow.
To help pay for LaSalle. LaSalle in those days was $800 a year. That might give you some idea. I think right now somewhere up around 30 or 40,000. I don't know.
At least.
But
yeah,
I
80,000.
worked really. I worked that summer at a bar called the Center Bar in Atlantic City, and in fact, it was the same bar that a few months before Nina Simone had worked.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, the transition from standing happened kind of gradually to sitting. That was this. Then after that, I just did what we call club dates. You're an agent, you call me, you need a show at say the Breakers Hotel in Atlantic City. You call a singer, you call a comic, and between the two of us, we could do maybe a 2-hour show for the clientele. Go ahead.
Nice.
The fans only came when I started working steadily, and that was the summer of 1970.
Yeah.
you weren't quite 2 years old yet, and we were in Atlantic City, and I was hired by Joey Falco to play his club called Pal Joey's, and he hired a band too to back me up. And about a month into the gig, he fired the band, and and Julie and I and you were out there. I had rented a place. I borrowed money from my mom to buy equipment, the custom equipment.
Yeah.
And yeah. So your mom said, "Why don't you play the piano? Tell Joey you played it." Are you kidding? I'm not a piano player. I'm a singer. I'm not going to stoop to playing the piano and singing.
That's what I wanted to know. Yeah, you felt that. You felt like you were taking a step down.
No question about it. So yeah. I went to Joey and said, "Look, Joey, I can play the piano." He said, "Okay, go ahead." Joey was a cool guy. He used to be a fighter. I did that. And one thing led to another. As I'm playing and singing, two guys from Philadelphia Magazine, Gaten Fonzie and Bernie McCormick, came in to do they were doing a complete workup of Atlantic City itself, bust out bars and stuff.
Yeah.
They came in to see me. And Gaten had done something on me when I was on the Arthur Godfrey show at 57. He and Bernie wrote this wonderful thing about me in this article.
Right.
Well, people from Philadelphia, they started coming into Pal Joey's. And that was the summer of 70. Ever since then, I made my living playing the piano and singing.
Fans one by one.
Now,
and then you make fans one by one.
So I think that we're taking for granted that people know what that means. And in my experience, I've seen enough solo, performers to know that everyone kind of has a different spin on it. And with you, where I think that you always stood out for me was that, like you said, you rarely took a break. And you eventually would bring quite a few other people up to sing with you or play an instrument or something like that. And that and this, I don't know how it compares to others, but your night was several hours long every night, several nights a week. And you would be the person to bring in the equipment, to set it up, to sound check, to work with whoever was there, to get the place, ready if it wasn't, and then do your entire show and then break it down. And while you were breaking down, you were talking to fans and doing all this other stuff too. Well, does that sound like a good description? Or
sort of. Remember, in those days, I could work one room 5 nights a week. When my agent, nice guy, Jerry Glasgow, had been my agent. He's eventually my agent for 18 years. But he sent me to the William Penn Inn in Lower Gwinnett up in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And I wound up staying there for 2 years. Now, imagine that. 2 years in one room, 5 nights a week. I didn't have to break down. I set the equipment up, and the only time I'd put it away was when I took my 3-week vacation.
Vacations, yeah.
Twice a year, I'd take 3 weeks off and just put the equipment away. But 5 nights a week, that's one of the lamentable things about today. When I think of you, for example, how do you have time to build a fan base? We're working 5 nights a week, technically 5 sets a night, which turned into a lot fewer sets, but longer. You get a chance to what we call woodshed, to build fans, a fanship, a fan base, one fan at a time. People come in, they like you, they bring other people in, and so forth and so forth. And I spent almost 15 years in Montgomery County, starting with the William Penn Inn. Bless, Peter Friedrich was the owner of the William Penn. And I remember one time I got food poisoning and I was off 2 nights. Peter paid me for those 2 nights.
Oh, that's unheard of.
Unheard of. and love the guy. There've been other stories, but that's the thing. You need that one place where you can work and concentrate on your singing, your playing, and building that fanship, that base, one fan at a time. And I love them all. That was my first. And what happened was, I was working the William Penn Inn, and a wonderful singer piano player named Hal Martin was working the Bluebell Inn.
Yes.
And Hal was, I guess, my major competition back then. So that's when I said to myself, I'm not going to give people a chance to leave me and go to see Hal, because I stopped taking breaks.
Oh, wow.
So I'd work like a full night, 5-hour night.
Yeah.
Never leaving this, I wasn't drinking beer or anything. I was drinking Remy, sipping it.
Sipping it. Yeah.
Well, you have to sip Remy, right?
Yeah. You don't have to, but yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. That's why I stopped taking breaks. I think I've told Hal this story. Hal's since moved to Arizona with Millie, his wife, but that's why I stopped taking breaks. And that sort of turned me into a kind of a semi-legend in the area, where people, this guy doesn't take breaks. Tommy Reagan, a good fan of mine, Tommy Reagan, who loved to sing with me. He's gone now, rest his soul. But he said he would bring people in and say, "Look, just stay for one set."
Oh, that's funny.
And the set never ended.
And then right, 1 5-hour set. That's great.
Right.
So let's. Well, this is somewhat of a segue into the next section. This is related to what we're talking about now, and it's going to move into where I want to get to. Another question from Jim Castelli, and this seems, the question's a little bit all over the place in terms of eras for you, but we'll see how it goes. How was the material you performed chosen? And I guess for that he might mean recordings and things. Then he says live performances were from the Great American Songbook. So he's, I guess, the way you perform in the clubs.
Sure.
But then, oh, I get it. But where did the originals come from? So I think in his case, what he mean originals, he would mean not your originals, but the stuff you sang as original material, like Tell the World About You or something like that.
Well, those were records that I made starting in '57, and just kept making records. Tell the World, as you happen to mention, that song was arranged by a guy named Walter Gates. Now, Walter Gates did all the arrangements pretty much for Bobby Rydell's recordings. Mm. And I did not choose those. They were chosen by the A&R people, artists and repertoire.
Got it.
Of the specific label or what have you. I didn't choose them.
Yeah.
I started recording. I recorded an album in 1961, the summer of '61. I was 19, and just of wonderful standards. And I really didn't choose all of those. Tony Mambo, we'll go into that later. And Tony Luisi, who was a genius of an arranger. He and his brother John had a recording studio called Sound Plus. They chose the recordings. In my live act, I rarely did anything original. Rarely.
Right.
So that's
and this actually, Jim mentioned the name Tony Luisi, so I guess he had a little bit of a.
Oh, he did, really?
Yeah, he must have had a clue as to who you worked with. So you're saying then, for really, all that period when you were recording all of this stuff, other people chose the songs and you sang them, with, I guess, the exception of, if there may be more exceptions, but I know there was a song called Lovey Dove.
Well, I did write that.
Which you wrote. Yeah. And that was, to me, unless I'm wrong, the only one from that whole era that you wrote and recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah. But was that the only one you also that chose?
I guess so. Yeah. I was, again, working with Tony Luisi, and Tony Lewis is also his stage name.
Yeah. Yeah.
And He did the arranging on Lovey Dove.
And now, did you actually have any control over choosing, and you just said, I'm fine with what you guys choose, or did you not really have any control over that?
Oh, I did have control, but I just ceded that control to people I trusted.
Okay. Okay,
Tony
good.
Luigi was one of them, Tony Mambo,
Yeah.
with the songs. He was Great American Songbook type of guy, Tony. He was in World War II, so that's his era. And yeah, and the stuff I did live, I did again concentrated on the songbook and whatever was popular coming up. For example, somebody requested the Stevie Wonder song. No, Stevie Wonder. It's from a movie.
Part-time lover.
I just called to say I love you.
Oh, that's the one. Yeah.
That's it. Okay. And I learned that. And I would
So you would take some requests and things.
Oh, no question. If somebody, a wonderful fan, Frank Cannon, his wife Annie, they became wonderful fans. Frank again was from that Sinatra era, and he requested a specific old Sinatra song, and I learned that for him. So you build up a repertoire based on that quote unquote base of great American songs and what people request along the way.
And what I found interesting as I watched you, or as I grew up and watched you develop and change in some ways, is that you, and we talked about this a little bit before, but you've never been a performer who said, I am a Michael Bublé. Like, well, he only pretty much only does standards and and then that kind of vocal performance and arrangement and all of that.
Sure.
You pulled from everything. I mean, I think a lot of what I say is stuff that I got into, especially from let's say the mid 70s to the early 80s, was because I heard you do it first. So stuff from Saturday Night Fever does not, it to me, yes, that is part of the Great American Songbook, because that songbook is way bigger than people think it is, but it's not a traditional standard.
No.
And so much of what you did wasn't that.
No, I included things, and I wouldn't spend the time to learn it unless I loved it. So well, you can tell by the way I use my walk, I'm a woman's man, no time to talk. So I thought it was wonderful. I mean, with Barry singing those, but even the Stevie Wonder song, I just called to say I love you. Various things that I've learned over the years, and some of them I've forgotten, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple of questions related to that, and let me start with this one. You once told me that you at one point had memorized a couple thousand songs.
Sure.
And I would say the questions I have there would be, what motivated you to learn that many, and why did you feel you needed to have every single one of them memorized?
Well, when I first started singing and playing, I used music.
Okay.
I used sheet music for, I would say, 70 to about 74 or 5, using music. And then I realized once I learned more and more songs without using music, that it was more important to just sing the song and play it and not have to look at music to do that. Now, that was an accumulative thing. It didn't just I didn't just go about and say, well, I'm gonna learn 2,000 songs. It just happened over the years. Gotcha. And it's one thing knowing a song, knowing how the words, the melody. That's one thing. The other thing is to be able to play it, to accompany yourself. So what I tell singers today, somebody says, I'd like to be a singer. Okay, take piano lessons or guitar lessons or whatever, something where you can accompany yourself. And I say that as also as a very practical thing. And I've told there's no way I could have made a living over the many years, 50 or so, whatever, working clubs, if I did not know how to play the piano, if I did not accompany myself. That's that simple. It's the playing and the singing that caused it to be able to happen.
And so, along with that, you would often talk about songs. And then we've talked about some things, and I don't need to repeat them. It's like the way you would show connections to songs by chord progressions, etc. But one of the things that you would often do is talk about the history of a song or some interesting fact about it, or ask everybody what year it came out or what movie was it featured in, to the point where it became not just trivia, but a little bit of an education for people listening. Why did you do that?
When I first started playing and singing on a full-time basis, and again, that was 70, when I came back from the shore in 71, I was booked into a piano bar in Philly called the 5100 Club. I said to myself, look, it's one thing playing and singing a song. I want to connect with the audience as well in other ways. So I said, okay, you check the bottom of a sheet music and it tells you what year the song was written. And then somebody bought me a book about rock and roll, and it had all kinds of wonderful trivia about the artists, about the songs they recorded, when they became hits. And that became a huge part of my shtick, as it were. To talk, as you just said, the history of the song, who did it, who might have done, what movie, did it come from a movie or was it a play? I always say to people, most of the songs we know and love come from either movies or musicals. Of course, that's no longer completely true, but back then it was.
Yeah, and to some degree, it's still the true in a lot of ways. So, well, that's, and I contend that part of the reason why my career is currently bifurcated into, music performance and creation and all that stuff and podcasting is because I just took those two elements of, you're doing a show, you're singing songs, you're making songs, you are talking about music and talking about songs, and I just separated them and just took them to the nth degree, and that's probably an influence.
That's that's courageous, man.
Well, it's something.
Admire your courage.
You said this before, and I'd love to know more about this because we've talked about this privately, but I think it's worth other people hearing it. You did primarily covers, and you would throw some originals in, and that's fine. But that goes for both your live and recorded careers. Was there a point when you made that decision, or was there a point midway where you thought you might want to do originals, but you were more comfortable with cover? What made you gravitate time and again to covers as opposed to originals?
It was safe.
Okay.
It was very safe to do songs that people already knew and loved. And my idea was to make this connection with the audience. And I knew I wasn't going to have that much influence if I just did originals. Again, that's why I admire the course you took. And I realized how difficult it was. But to sing, a person walks in and, oh, yeah, right, and I sing their song. It was safe and it worked. Covers. And I, again, lament the fact that you've got no place to call a steady gig,
right,
where you can hone your craft live with people, and people who appreciate the kind of music that you do. It's things have changed so much, not to mention the pandemic, but even before the
Right,
pandemic.
even before then. Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
You're lucky if you can work 2 nights in one room. 2 nights in one room.
Oh, yeah.
I started working, 5, 6 nights in one room
Yes.
for extended period of time.
Incredible.
Yeah,
There are a couple people that I'll be interviewing this season, in particular Leslie Goschko and Paula Leschin, and they are both singer piano players who do primarily covers. They part of their act, I believe, or at least for Paul, involves bringing people up to sing and whatever. There are other differences, etc. But I admire them because they have steady gigs, but in their version, or today's version of a steady gig, is they play once a week for a couple of hours at a club. And that's amazing. It's admirable, and it's great for everybody involved, but it's not a living. So that is how things have changed. And even their ability to do just the once a week is a very rare thing.
Now, do you know whether or not they do that in just one club, or can they?
Yes, it's in the one club. Yeah, it's
Okay.
Sid Gold's. Yeah, so it's
Gold. Yeah, I've heard of it.
yeah.
I've heard of it.
And that's just the vibe of that club, and it's partly because it's rooted, as many of the clubs in that general area are, in the kind of the cabaret history of things in New York. So it lends itself towards people wanting that kind of a regularity and inclusion and stuff like that. So
that's the beauty of piano bars as well. Yeah.
Right.
People sit around the bar, they're that close to the performer, and that performer is that close to the people.
Yeah.
Here's what I got.
Yeah.
Want to come in? You want to come into my world?
Right.
If you want to, I can lead you into my world.
You're creating a world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess this is I don't know, last question in this section is the $12 question. And so I only have $12. So that's all it's costing. And it's from
I'll do it for nothing.
Okay. Hey, Suzanne Schultz Mastroeni. Sorry if I mispronounced that.
Sue.
And here it comes. What were your favorite and least favorite songs that you sang or performed or recorded?
Takes me back to 1971 when I was working the 5100 Club in Philadelphia on City Line Avenue, 51st and City Line, and piano bar. And there's a guy who had a little bit too much to drink. And he said, "What's your favorite song?" And I said, "I don't have one." Well, he said, "What do you mean? You're a singer. You know all these songs. You got to have a favorite song someplace." The very fact, I said, that I know and love so many songs, I can't call one my favorite. And as far as least favorites, like I said, if I took the time to learn the song, I had to love it enough. So that's the only answer.
Was there ever a song though that someone requested that you were compelled to fulfill that request, but you were like, "Nah, it's not really my bag"?
Yeah, I just called to say I love you.
Okay.
See who you want. Somebody requested it, and I wasn't that crazy about this song. Once I learned it and started doing it, of course, I changed my opinion. But that's the one I learned it, and I turned around and I started loving the song. Interesting thing, back in '65, came back from South America. I was a tour there, and I heard a song on the radio called "Hang On, Sloopy." Well, I just didn't like that song. Okay, now I love it. I started hearing it more and more. I got into the groove of the blues, bum, 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 bum. Yeah. And so that's the only answer, Sue, I can give to that.
Fair enough. Yeah.
She's Sue, and God bless her.
That was so great. Yeah, and
mom and dad, Axel and Joyce, wonderful people.
Oh, such a
The
great
whole
family.
whole family. Yeah.
When I ever think of anything like that, favorites, least favorites, listen, and you can ask Catherine or anyone I talk to, if there's a song or an artist that just does not resonate with me, you will know about it. Like I will be able to tell you, like, that is a person whose voice I just don't get. And it's not even that I think that they're subpar or, I mean, I have my complex opinions, but I categorize so much that I can pull out something like that. When it comes to favorites, it's the same thing. I can say, well, my favorite in this category or from this band, and even that may change. My running joke is this, this is one of my top 5 favorite bands, and my top 5 is a rotating top 5. Anything from my top 15 could end up in the top 5 if I feel like it does, and I think that that holds true with, and I think that's with artists. When you're talking about individual songs, how can you possibly, and I think maybe what Suzanne is getting at, and maybe not, maybe she wanted to know your favorite song. I know there are a lot of piano bar people who don't like doing Piano Man because they think it's cliche or something like that. Right. But you always did such a great version. I saw a version recently on TV, and I was like, that person is not connected to that song in any way, but compared to the way you do it, that's a whole different, is a whole different thing. But maybe what she would want to know in terms of connecting is, were there certain artists or songwriters or people that you gravitated to that's, I love their music more so, or I can interpret that music in a way that's more personal to me?
Well, I guess, Billy Joel, of course, was one of them. Elton John. I used to do a lot of Elton John. Neil Diamond.
Oh, yeah.
And
Beatles.
of course the Beatles, but that's. But I'm talking about like single artists.
That's great though. No, you've done bands too. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Vic Damone.
Perfect. That's perfect, because that brings me to my next question, which was sent in by one Cheryl Lundgren. And I'm going to read the whole thing because I like the details she put in here. It's got some length to it, but I think you'll like this. She says, when my mother and father-in-law were alive and our girls were still at home, we used to have Sunday dinners and holidays at our house. We barbecued a lot, and we always had music playing, tons of food and wine. One of our favorites was a compilation of songs called Mob Hits. They did a series of these, but the first one was our favorite. Obviously, they weren't really mob songs, but they all had Italian singers, or at least we thought they were Italian. I was wondering if you've ever listened to them, and that was for me, but I know you have, and if any of the songs were really of Italian origin. There were artists like Dean Martin, Jerry Vale, Al Martino, Louis Prima, Julius La Rosa, and if the artists were really all Italian, were they added to that collection because they were used in movies about the mob? Great question.
Johnny Fontaine. Al Martino played that character in The Godfather.
Yep.
And it was supposedly close to what Sinatra was, because he was going for a role in the movie, and we all know what role in what movie Frank Sinatra made his enormous comeback, and that was the role of Private Maggio in the movie From Here to Eternity, 1953. Sinatra won the Best Supporting Actor. And Italians, as far as we know Sinatra's fully Italian. We know Dean Martin, whose real name is Dino Crocetti. At least we know his father is Italian. Al Martino, his real name was Al Cini, Cini, from South Philly. I did meet Mr. Martino. Jerry Vale, Italiano, Vitaliano. That's yeah. And I guess because mob, quote unquote, you associate that with Italian names. And that's why they call them mob. It's, Dean Martin's version of, you'll hear it probably many times, kick in the head.
Yeah.
That's classic, quote unquote mob hit.
Yes, we did.
Yeah,
That was that's in that's in a movie that was just recently released called The Many
Really?
Saints of Newark. Yeah,
Oh,
that
okay,
was
yeah.
one of the songs in there.
You're in that movie, aren't you?
I happen to be the one who was singing it, and so but I one of the interesting things, and I always thought it was just fascinating and kind of neat to me to discover how many of those singers with Anglo names were actually Italian. So that was kind of neat. And like you said, Dean Martin and even Tony Bennett, we know he's, everybody knows that now, but growing up like us, his name is Tony Bennett, but it's Anthony Benedetto, right?
Right.
And I had mentioned to Cheryl when I saw this question that my opinion about it being mob related was that many people associate Italians with the mob, and that subsequently a lot of these songs were used in mob movies, but initially they were just singles on the charts.
Yeah. Jimmy Roselli, Mala Femmina.
Yeah.
Mala Femmina is that's a real Italian song. But anyway, yeah. Right. Again, the association with Italians, names that, ended vowels,
yeah,
with the mob, but it isn't necessarily an untrue association.
It's not completely untrue. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean,
or then and then the other part of the question being, let's say Mala Femmina was a true Italian song. Mambo Italiano was not a true Italian song, and
right. Yeah.
That's Amore was not really an Italian song, right? But there were others that were on that collection and that were popular songs that were either fully sung in Italian or originally written in Italian, but then sung in English.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, no question.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll be down to get you in a taxi, honey. Better be ready about 8:30. And then Lou Monte from North Jersey did a version in '57. Advenia piaco quattro giuc. Domani sera alle 8 mezz. He said, I'm going to come and pick you up with 4 donkeys tomorrow at 8:30. He was a real spender.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, man. Well, so I'm going to extend this a little bit because there are several other things that I could get to here, but there was one I really wanted to talk a little bit more about because I felt this was something we ran out of time for in our last 2 hours. And that is we've talked about the career development and the things you've recorded, and whether it was Blame It on My Youth, the album of standards, or the singles, the rock and roll and pop singles that you did, and then even that even extended into the early 70s when you did things like I'll Be There and Heading for New York City and all those, early mid 70s. I keep touching the mic. And then we talked about Lovey Dove, and I'm kind of looking at my, at my list here. But I wanted to ask, I guess, 3 or 4 things. One is, of the singles that you recorded from late 50s to early 70s, are there a handful that are your favorites?
Yeah. I'm thinking, I have asked a raindrop and a twinkling star to tell me where my love is.
There you go.
Tell me where you are. That's one of my favorites. A number of others.
I remember that one.
And Tony Luisi had a lot to do with them, Tony and his brother John, in terms of writing and arranging.
Want to Be Lonely?
Yeah, I Want to Be Lonely. That was 66. With Jerry Ross. Jerry Ross produced that. Now, Jerry Ross was a local Philadelphia producer who was probably most famous for producing the Bobby Hebb song, Sonny, Yesterday, my heart.
Mm,
So, but anyway,
great.
yeah, there are a number of favorites, and I mean, I can't recall them like off the top of my head without like listening to them. And there are so many.
Sure,
And
sure. You did so many. Yeah.
thanks to Julie's compilation that she did. There are six CDs out there.
That's right. And as always, I include links with these interviews, everybody out there. And
really?
I actually haven't discussed which links we're including here because this is a follow-up. And so there's some info that we want to go over, but I think including a link to those albums on Bandcamp, let's say, would be a good start. So
Okay.
anybody who's curious about all the music we're talking about, you can hear that on Nicky's Bandcamp page.
If you got a few days you want to lose.
Yeah, exactly. And you should. And so then you did an album in the mid 70s, 76, that was Your Name, is an eponymous album that was all your music. It was 10 originals. I remember some of those recording sessions even. And I guess the question here is two questions. What compelled you to release an album of originals? And how much more material did you have that wasn't on that album?
Well, thanks to these wonderful people, Joyce and Axel Schultz became fans back in '73. That's when I met them, and we became part of their family. We used to go to their place, and the Schultz kids. There was just a wonderful, two wonderful people. May they both rest in peace. But they believed in me very much, and they had financed a record heading for New York City. That's another story. It it wasn't a hit or anything, but the money they got back from their taxes, they took that money and invested in me to go to Sound Plus in Philly. Tony Luisi, who did the arrangement for the 10 songs in that eponymous Nicky DeMatteo album.
Country songs.
And there's
Well, we'll get to that. But as far as that era, were there other songs that you had written that didn't make it on the album?
I really can't remember what other songs might have been included in that album. I didn't write anywhere near the catalog that you have going for you. I'm not sure how many songs I've written, but I am a sight older.
Was there a song called "Thank Goodness It's Friday" or something like that?
Oh my gracious, yeah.
That's a song I've always remembered. I think that was yours, right?
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't quite remember how it goes, but you're right. TGIF.
And the San Francisco song.
Julie and she took me to San Francisco on one of her prizes or something, and I wrote a song called, I forgot what the name of it was. It had to do with San Francisco.
That was when was that?
I'm thinking the late 70s, early 80s, possibly.
It had to be the 90s.
Really?
I wasn't contesting until 1990.
Well, if it was a contest.
And it wasn't a contest. We just decided to go, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Well, so yeah, and I've always wondered that because I know that a lot of artists, most artists, will have some more material than ends up on an album.
Of course, you know that.
And I know that you didn't really record any others, but I wondered if you had actually written a bunch of others and just chose those 10 or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the choices were made. But
yeah.
Tony,
and again, that's on Bandcamp too, everyone. So please listen to that. And then and I know you did some things in the interim there between, let's say 76 and the early 90s. Were there recordings? You did a couple of recordings there or no?
I can't recall any, except for those 4 country songs I wrote.
Well, now, so then that gets to that. So then you put out a country EP called Countrified City Boy.
Countrified City Boy, right.
That was in the early 90s, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, and those were all original country songs.
Yes, yes. Countrified City Boy.
And what motivated you to do that one?
Well, I had written those songs specifically concentrating on the country aspect of it, and I'm South Philly doo-wop kid, you're not supposed to like country. But the Countrified City Boy says, oh, well, I do. I like country, it does something to me, and I appreciate what it means.
About Would You Kiss Me
And
One More Time? The story behind
And the other song, well, Would You Kiss Me One More Time Before You Leave Me? My partner here, Julie, the Hungarian. Oh, the Hungarian. By the way, I was the only one in a family of 10 to marry a non-Italian.
You rebel.
I guess I was. But anyway, so she won a trip to New York, Paul Newman's contest, from which she got $10,000, and she had to give it to charity. But she was going to New York, and I couldn't go with her. I was working. So she took Joyce Schultz to New York, and before she left, I said, kiss me one more time before you leave me. So I wrote the song, and the people who heard the song just kind of assumed that there was a rift in our relationship that caused me to write a song like that.
Yeah.
You know yourself as a writer, you get an idea to write a song, and it's a whole different interpretation from the people who hear it.
Which is great. Yeah, they make it
fine,
personal for them. Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, I don't know. There's so many possibilities out there.
Well, yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, this is perfect. We've covered quite a lot. I'm sure there were things that I would love to get into more that we missed. There were a couple of things that Jim threw up here that he wanted to talk about, which I think are more kind of aside, which we can discuss, and or we discussed them previously. But otherwise, I think that this, I feel better about this because I didn't know what we'd get into doing an interview. And I knew about halfway through our last interview that we would never get to everything. And we did that kind of like artificial partition where we said, okay, the second interview is going to be anything from 1970 and beyond. But we didn't really get into the country music and stuff like that. And I just wanted to kind of paint a more complete picture of all of the things that you've done, and to get a little deeper into some of the music issues and things in your history. And I think that we were able to do that. So thank you for all of the time that you've spent here today.
Thank you for being who you are and what you're accomplishing here. God bless you, buddy.
Well, thank you. And thank you to everybody out there. Say that again.
You and Catherine.
Oh, yes, that's right. That was, I'm gonna let you in on a little behind the scenes in the industry here. That'll be the first interview of this season that hopefully you've already seen, is with Catherine and me. I'm not going to say any more about it unless you've seen it. Just go see it and you'll see what I mean. Wow. I'm recording this one in advance of that, but releasing this one as the second one of the season. So just a little fun thing. Sometimes things are not recorded in order, just so you know. But as always, thank you everybody for watching. If you are on Patreon, thank you very much. If you are listening on any of the podcast platforms, thank you for listening. Thank you for reading all the text and clicking all the links and listening to more music and sharing, especially sharing and reposting, and in any way bringing more people into the family. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention and your ears. And until next interview, this is Nick DeMatteo and
Nicky DeMatteo
saying goodbye.
Love you, buddy.
You too.